Hi everyone, it's Rachel back with the Shades of Orange. Today I'm here to bring you a starter pack of horror recommendations for people that want to get into the genre. Now, I was challenged to do this by the editors of Lady Business, which is a fanzine that is both feminist and intersectional and focuses on pop culture, everything from TV shows to movies to video games and of course books. If you haven't checked them out, I definitely recommend it. I love reading through their articles. And in this challenge, they requested that I include only books that would be suitable for readers that want to try horror, but don't want to read about violence against women. And I totally respect that. Horror definitely has a bad reputation for having some really bad content, and for good reasons. There was a lot of books that I thought about including on this list, but realized that I would have had to include content warnings, but I rose to the challenge and I'm really happy with the books that I came up with. These books all contain absolutely no violence against women, but let me be clear that these are still horror books, so there are characters in this book that are in harm's way, and some of those characters are female, but they don't require any content warnings for abuse, violence, sexual, or otherwise. And I think that these are just really entertaining stories, very accessible for people that are new to the genre, and in a lot of these cases, some of these are pretty spooky. All that being said, let's get into the books. First, I want to recommend a novella, and that is The Ghost Line by Andrew Neil Gray and J.S. Herbison. This is about a married couple that work as salvagers and they go onto an abandoned spaceship to gather supplies. However, they feel like something or someone is watching them. I describe this as a haunted house story set in space, which frankly is an amazing premise, and the story is just as good. I want to recommend this for a few reasons. First, because it is novella, it's shorter, and I think that makes it a little bit easier for people who want to try horror, but don't necessarily want to commit to a 500 or 600 page epic novel. So this one is easy to get into. As well, I think this one will appeal a lot to people who normally read science fiction and want to try horror. The two genres are very closely linked together, and this story just blends the genres so well. I wouldn't describe this one as overly scary. Instead, it's just very atmospheric and will give you those creepy vibes without giving you a story that is going to be over the top. It's not gory, and in fact actually has a really beautiful representation of a happily married couple, which I always appreciate in my books. Now, if you want to go with a haunted house story that is a little closer to home, or at least on this planet, I would recommend The Graveyard Apartment by Mariko Koike, and this is translated from Japanese, which is where the author is from. And this is about a family that move into an apartment because the rent is cheap, it's beautiful, it's new, and seems almost too good to be true. However, the only downside is that it is built right next to a graveyard. And I like this book for a couple reasons. It gives you the classic tropes of the haunted house genre, but at the same time, because you get that Japanese perspective, you really get an infusion of that culture and get to see how the Japanese people tend to view spirits, which is very ingrained in their culture, as well as their burial rites. So I definitely think this one is both a classic take on the haunted house story, but also gives you a bit of something extra to dig into. And it's a slow burn, it's atmospheric, not too scary. It definitely builds as you get towards that climax, but you can safely read this book as one of your first horror books without getting something that's a little too crazy or over the top. Now, I also think that trying a young adult book is a nice way to dip your toes into a new genre. So for a young adult horror book, I want to recommend Frozen Charlottes by Alex Bell. And this is about a teenage girl who has a tragedy that causes her to be sent to live with her cousins for the summer. And they themselves have had tragedy in their past. They lost their sister, and they live in a renovated boarding house. And within this house, they find these little dolls that they call Charlottes. And these dolls are just a little bit creepy. And strange things start to happen around the house. And the younger sister, the teenage girl's cousin, starts to wonder if these dolls are possibly coming to life, if they're whispering at night. And it's a question of, are these just some really creepy dolls, or is there something more going on? I think this is a great place to start for anyone who wants to try some creepy doll horror, which is one of my personal favorite things in the genre. This one, again, isn't over the top. in terms of creepiness or gore, there really isn't anything gruesome in this one. But while this is young adult, don't be fooled. Young adult horror can still be very scary, and this one definitely creeped me out. There are some creepy moments in it. It's almost a bit psychological as you're trying to decide if things are just in the people's heads or if these dolls are actually coming to life. So I definitely recommend that one. It's a lot of fun. It's a quick read and a great place again to start with horror. Now, if you want to try some creature horror, I would recommend Into the Drowning Deep by Mira. The premise for this one is that a group of filmmakers went out to the Marianas Trench 7 years ago in order to film a fake documentary about mermaids. However, something went terribly wrong and they did not return. So now in the present day, a new group of people have been assembled, including a lot of scientists, to investigate what happened. Now, this book is exactly what it sounds like. Yes, this is a book about killer mermaids, which is so much fun. However, despite that fun pitch, I do want to let you know that this book has a lot of depth to it. It is a piece of science fiction, so it definitely will appeal to people who read more of that genre. You get a lot of background on the biology behind these supposed mermaids, and there's a lot of good character development. You get a good representation in this book. There are characters that are lesbian as well as bisexual, and even the inclusion of some deaf characters. As a piece of creature horror, I need to let you know that there is some gruesome moments in this book, but I don't think they're over the top. So if you want to just have some fun with some killer mermaids, this is such a good one to pick up. I definitely recommend it. Finally, I really wanted to recommend A Possession Story because it is such a classic of the genre. However, a lot of those books tend to have some really weird subject matter in there, but I found one that I am very comfortable to recommend, and that is a novella called Come Closer by Gran. This one is told from a first-person perspective from the point of view of the woman who is possibly possessed. She basically takes on the role of an unreliable narrator because people are saying that she is doing things that she doesn't remember doing, and she just finds herself having strange impulses. And it's kind of the story where you don't know at first if she is possessed or possibly having some kind of mental breakdown. And I absolutely love this story. It is very smart and insightful and is a little more empowering than some of the other possession narratives. And I would definitely recommend it. Again, because it is novella length, it's a little bit shorter, a little bit easier to get through, but I'd still actually call this one quite creepy. It doesn't have anything gruesome or gory in it, but instead it plays along with the lines of a psychological horror where the horror really comes from being inside her head and not quite knowing what's going on. So if you think that that sounds really good, I would highly recommend this one. It's one of my personal favorites and I would love to see more people checking it out. So that is it for this video. Let me know down below how you think I did with this starter pack. Do you agree that these are good books for people starting out in the horror genre? I would also love to hear your recommendations for what books you would recommend for beginners. Thanks again to the editors at Lady Business for giving me this challenge. It was so much fun to complete, and I would definitely recommend checking out their fanzine if you're not familiar with it. If you don't follow my channel, I really encourage you to subscribe because I do read a lot of horror, as you can probably tell, as well as science fiction and fantasy. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I will talk to you again soon. Okay, bye-bye.